Aloha and welcome to Lesson 11.1, our first discussion of Chinese music. And this is titled Music Ancient and Modern, Representative Genres and Instruments in China. And zero in on that idea of simultaneously blending elements that are ancient and elements that are modern, because that will go throughout this discussion. First of all, let's talk about the People's Republic of China, sometimes known as PRC, also sometimes known as mainland China. The world's most populous nation, of course, I think just about everyone knows that. 1.3 billion people. Now, just to give you a sense of the comparison to Taiwan, or the Republic of China, or ROC, that population is 23 million. In other words, that's a lower population than California or Texas. And I think when I did the math, it's there it is. The PRC has 56 times the population of the ROC. Singapore and Malaysia also have a high percentage of Chinese immigrants, so there's a strong Chinese ethnicity in those places. And of course, there is a Chinese diaspora throughout the world at this point. Now, the text that we used in the on-campus course, the one I referred to throughout this online, talks about China's musical present existing in a permanent state of counterpoint with the musical past. Now, let's deconstruct that statement a little bit. What do you think the author was trying to say there? Permanent state of counterpoint with the musical past. First of all, what is counterpoint? Have we talked about that enough in this course that you understand what that is? It ties into the concept of polyphonic music or polyphony, that there are many independent melodies or independent lines that weave together. So to use this as a metaphor here, the author is saying that you have a strain, if you will, of the musical present, and it's coexisting, it's interweaving with the musical past. Now, in the text, they also talk about how that relates to the yin-yang concept. And if you're not familiar with how that works, you have the male and the female creating this holistic or integrated whole. And this idea of two different strains coming together and melding together is parallel to that. Now let's take a look at two YouTube examples and see whether they illustrate this perspective or whether they don't. First one, we'll watch 3 minutes and make some judgments or make some connections on this. That sounds very traditional, doesn't it? Even if you don't know Chinese music, you get a sense of maybe things you've heard in the movies or other sources, and you get a sense of that being traditional Chinese music. Now, compare that, contrast it to the second video.
都指向离散月桂的地方，灵魂前进，但终究还是得要习惯的想象的人格。你留不是你最大的致命伤，我按兵不动，注意习惯，凡是沉默的音量当头炮，准备治愈。我礼貌的开场，冰封马儿，生化内敛起来一楼课纲，第26招跑剑子，只是在期待金衡阳山势生招，绝二并肩，出手你恐怕将暗箭难防。这一场不流血的汤汁，有次总会受伤。从我们土的铁证跟剑什么上领养，地震了人的老头站在一旁抱着肩膀，我猜他想的应该和我一样。看我手指放手，我目光路人，当敌人失控，我苍老无穷，我攻势如风，用单击如风，碾过你傲伤的脸孔。望我手指放手，我目光路人，当敌人失控，我左右开弓，我气势如虹，将黄马惊动，引领千山舌头都没用。我对着潮汐推敲384一击自动，在理解迷雾能不能当场给发的内容，越转心意的轨迹跟邻居不曾相同，风林火山是何时用兵自重，到最后必然是末日成为我，你最后放弃抵抗，我要望着夕阳，你低头黯然离场，听我说胜败是兵家之长，你不用放在心上，是因为我只适合无双。看我手指放手，我目光路人，当敌人失控，我苍老无穷，我攻势如风，用单击如虹，碾过你傲伤的脸孔。望我手指放手，我目光路人，当敌人失控，我左右开弓，我气势如虹，将宝马惊动，引领千山舌头都没用。看我手指放手，我目光路人，当敌人失控，我苍老无穷，我攻势如风，用单击如虹，碾过你傲伤的脸孔。望我手指放手，我目光路人，当敌人失控，我左右开弓，我气势如虹，将宝马惊动，引领千山舌头都没用。看我手指放手，我目光路人，当敌人失控，我苍老无穷，我攻势如虹，用单击如虹，碾过你傲伤的脸孔。望我手指放手，我目光路人，当敌人失控，我左右开弓，我气势如虹，将宝马惊动。
你往哪走？你往哪走？
北北将军，
你干什么呢？
我不是大丈夫，我是小女子。
So obviously we have rap music here. We have contemporary influences. And to me, this is an interesting juxtaposition because you see the older gentlemen dressed in a traditional way. They're playing a traditional Chinese game that is involved with gambling, and that's a part of Chinese cultural custom. But you have the young rapper dressed in a very Western hip-hop way, and some dancing. Obviously the music relates to that, and then later on that kind of metaphor where the humans are on that grid like the Chinese game, the gambling game. So there is a real visual and audio connection to this idea of counterpoint, present and past. Okay, the next issue we need to address then is the idea of traditional music. What is traditional music when traditions change in every culture? And by this time in the semester, it should be very clear to you that traditions, musical and otherwise, do not remain static in a culture. They're dynamic. They're always changing. So in that context, what can we define as authentic? What can we define as traditional? So let's use the Chinese instrument, the pipa, as an example of how this might work. First, I have a Wikipedia entry for you to read about the pipa, and then we'll consider some questions. First of all, what did you sense from reading that has changed about the pipa playing over the years? Well, hopefully you picked up on the fact that sometimes they have added more frets for more melodic notes on there. They said up to 26 frets total. You hopefully picked up on the fact that there have been 4-string and 5-string versions, and now the standard version is 4 strings. And certain things about the playing techniques, the picking techniques have changed. So if we have that kind of evolution, and they even called it an evolution in the heading of the one section on the Wikipedia article, then we might look at a certain kind of pipa playing in a YouTube example here and see if we should call this a modern traditional style as opposed to an ancient traditional style. Check out this YouTube video. Now, do you feel you have enough information or enough context to know whether that's a modern style? Maybe you still don't have that sorted out yet, but this is certainly a modern way of playing and plucking, creating those fast strummed notes, and this is one of the instruments that has more frets than the older instruments have. So here's another way that we can challenge the notion of tradition in looking at the erhu, the two-string spike fiddle. The best way to describe this is a folk instrument that has turned into a classical instrument. Now let's turn to another Wikipedia article so that we can get a sense of how it was performed in a folk or traditional setting and how it's performed in a more contemporary era or modern era, classical still, but used in a different way, almost to emulate the sound of Western violin. Hopefully one of the things you picked up on there is that in the traditional folk music setting, it was often used to accompany singing, and often in a heterophonic style, where the erhu would play the melody that the singer is singing, but ornamenting in slightly different ways. And now it is often used as a featured melodic instrument in non-vocal pieces. And that can happen in a solo setting. That can happen in an instrumental ensemble setting. Let's take a look at the first 3 minutes of a video here to get a sense of that type of usage.